Where do we go from here, right? Somewhere over the rainbow, as if it's some sort of odd utopia that we'll never get to. But I was a documentary filmmaker in a previous life as well, and I've done two documentary films in Nicaragua, one during the Contra War in the 80s, and my last documentary film was done in 1998 with Nicaraguan street kids, talking about the music, art, and theater of street kids. And they use narrative story from the most poorest barrios of Managua to change the social conditions in which they're living in. And when we come back to Canada and they say, oh, there's nothing we can do, oh, how it's so difficult to do things, when I have this memory of working with street kids in Managua who are out there challenging what's going on with sexual assaults, police assault on them, drug addiction and stuff like that. So I thought it was brilliant that you started the conference with talking about the power of stories and the metaphors that are in there. And throughout the conference to hear about music and art and theater and how that's a part of our movement and how we connect forward. And a big part of my talk is in relation to three things that is in this movie. And it's about the brains, the heart, and the courage that we need to move forward. And that's how we're going to create this utopia. And ultimately, as the movie says as well, there really is no place like home. So oftentimes the work that we're already doing here in Alberta, in British Columbia, are absolutely key to how we actually create a better world. I wanted to go to a more modern version of The Wizard of Oz. How many of you have seen this movie, Inception? Okay, some but not all. Inception is a very cool movie because it talks about these guys having the ability to go into someone's dream cycles and insert an idea. And so they do that in this movie, but they do it and they understand that they have to go deep within the person's dream cycle. It's not enough just to put an idea in there. They have to go down to the third or fourth level and to connect with people at their fundamental values. And this is what George Lakoff talks about, if people have heard of George Lakoff and the Rockridge Institute, about framing. But it's not enough just to analyze the issues and declare victory and go home. You have to really connect with people on the level of their values. You also have to understand, and in this movie we all have filters in our brain, and there's filters that are trying to keep out foreign ideas that are being inserted into our minds. So there's a great book that I recommend as well called The Political Brain by Drew Weston, where he talks, he's a neuroscientist, and in my early university years I studied neurophysiology, and I think it's important to connect with people based on how do our brains work? How do we come to create an understanding of the world and to connect with their sense of who they are in terms of their values and stuff. But the idea of the whole process of inserting ideas is very much what this conference is about. It's about the brain, it's about connecting and inserting those ideas. And I remember when I was head of the Parkland Institute, which is the sister organization to CCPA BC, we brought in Ralph Nader, and he was speaking at a conference at Edmonton on the privatization of healthcare. And one of the things that really stuck with me was he said that, this is in 1998, he said after taking on the auto industry, they decided they were going to take on big tobacco. And some senator stopped him on the steps of the Senate and said, Ralph, what are you doing? You can't take on big tobacco. Tobacco's king. And he said, yeah, it's true. And back in the late 60s, nobody had taken on tobacco. So what they decided to do is not go to the U.S. government and say, we want you to ban smoking because it's killing people. They actually went and they convinced 2 airlines to set up no smoking sections on airplanes. I don't know, most of you are around my age, some of you might be younger. I remember sitting in the no smoking section as a child. It's sort of like being in a no peeing section of a pool, because there's a guy in front of you who's in the smoking section and you're in the no smoke. And we're like, what the heck? Well, who cares about a no smoking section on an airplane? I said, but for the first time, we had inserted the idea that some people don't want to sit in other people's smoke. And that was a huge and powerful insertion of ideas, and it moved to no smoking sections in restaurants, and it went to the point where there's nobody smoking in this room, which makes me very, very happy. We, you know, and we can go, and my wife, who's very allergic to smoking, we can actually go to the bar now in Edmonton, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to recognize that the brain part of this, the insertion of ideas, is the first step. But we need the heart, okay? And I love this picture because how many of you have kids? Okay? 3 o'clock in the morning, kids up. I have twin boys, by the way, so I had double whammy of this. They're 19 now. But you know that inside all of us, there are inherent advocates. We fight for what is necessary for our lives. And we have to connect our activism and our advocacy at that emotional level because the work that we are doing is fundamental for people's lives, just like this baby. If you can connect to the average person out there, the work that we're doing, everything that we've talked about today, to public health care, think of this child's life going forward, to their economic security, to whether or not mothers have access to good early childhood education and care, so they can go on to get an education, so that they can go on to get a post-secondary education, that we have healthy air to breathe, and ultimately that our seniors are well looked after. If we can connect our activism and our advocacy to that, and in the words of George Lakoff, really connect to the values of people, then we can build the movement, and that's how we're going to be able to move forward here. Because these things are life and death matters. These things do matter to their lives. I'm working on an issue right now in relation to the tar sands, where Dr. John O'Connor, who's a friend of mine, is working on the issue of carcinogens in the area of Fort McMurray that are literally killing First Nations people. And we have to be able to connect our fundamental values, our fears of our own selves getting cancer and what have you, to the broader issues of what it is that we are doing in this society. And those pipelines that are going to be coming through BC, through First Nations territories and stuff, are fundamental to that. And this baby, to me, represents the future as well, because it talks about that. And that's the level that we need to be able to connect people on if we're going to be successful with our advocacy. So from there, we need courage. And as Gary said, that's a very fuzzy picture, very fuzzy forest fire. Tell me seriously in this room, how many of you would like to come fight this forest fire with me? Nobody? And what I've learned over time is that oftentimes when you're talking to a person, if they have not been involved in a movement, in politics and what have you, and you say, hey, do you want to get involved in this protest or this activism or what have you, you might as well be asking them to go fight a forest fire. Why would I do that? I don't know how to do it. It's scary. I'm going to get dirty. And you're nuts, right? Why would I do that, right? So what we have to do is we have to give people courage. And the way you give people courage is you train them and you build a system. And we have to have the system that brings the various movements together. We have to set up an observer network, just like there are forest fire there are towers out there on top of mountains looking for what's going on. We have to build an explicit communications network. Once you get called to that fire, they've seen the fire, they call you in, we have our networks. We don't just land on the fire. You have to do research. You have to understand the conditions in which you're working in. You have to understand those dynamics. And from the helicopter, before you even land on the ground, you're developing a strategy. What are the resources that you're bringing in? You have to have people on the ground, people in the air. You have to be working together. You have to build a total system. But ultimately, you do have to get dirty. Ultimately, you do have to take action, and you need to get out there, and you need to engage in fighting that fire. And no, you don't just set up a strategy and do that for, oh, we're going to do this for the next 6 months. It's an iterative process. You do something, politics change, you try something else, just like fighting a forest fire. And the seventh and I think the most important stage is ultimately we need to be celebrating. We need to be celebrating the work that we're doing. And putting the body on the line. And that's very much what courage is about and what the Occupy movement is about. Just quickly, this is a fire triangle. First thing that you do when you're learning to fight forest fires is you have to think about what are the 3 elements that it takes to have a fire. So you need F, you need a fuel, you need O, you need oxygen, and you need H, you need heat. If you take one of those things away, you no longer have a fire. What do you need to have successful advocacy and activism? The first thing you need to do, and in fact we've spent a lot of time doing this today and it's been excellent, is you need to define the flaw and you need to define the fix. What is wrong? What is going on? And how are we going to fix it? I'm sure some of you can also think of another F word that means things are not going so well. Okay? So that's the first step. If you come and you define the flaw and everything, that's not enough. You have to have some oxygen. You have to have some some outrage, some emotion. It's not enough just to intellectually understand in your brain what's going on. You have to connect to the heart in order to get people to mobilize and to move on that. But what happens if all of us, you've defined the flaw and you've gotten people fired up and they're really emotional? Do you have a fire? No, you have a bunch of people sitting in the bar drinking and depressed because they're just like, oh my God. So you need the H. You need hope. If you give them hope, if you give them that sense that advocacy and activism and this work is possible, then you finally have a fire, okay? And that is the absolute thing that we need to do if we're going to be successful in how we move forward. It is the catalyst that brought about the Arab Spring. It is the root of Occupy movement. That for some, as the fire is lit, people are saying, we have some hope. We've done some analysis. We are outraged. And now we have some hope. And that's what brings people together. How many of you know how to put out this campfire? Anybody know how to put out a campfire? Some people don't know how to put out a campfire? Really? We are all fighting fires. We are all engaged in this process. We know how to do this. And sometimes when we have small fires, it's very important that we're watching them. They actually give us heat and everything like that. If you do not put out the small fires, you end up with a forest fire, okay? Politically, the work you are all doing in your own communities at whatever level is a small fire. It is all interconnected with the bigger forest fire. If you do not attend to these things and know how to work and connect those things together, though, then you have to have support from a much bigger system. So we've been talking about capitalism today. How do we deal with that? We need to build an equally big system in order to address and to challenge those things. And ultimately what it is saying is that everyone has that capacity in whatever way you're working on to be a part of those solutions. So Public Interest Alberta is kind of a unique organization in Canada. We don't have anything like it. We've brought together all kinds of individuals, all the major labor movement from the Alberta Federation of Labor to the 25,000 nurses to the 40,000 teachers in the province to the 6,500 social workers. We have all the students' unions of the 17 colleges and institutes and universities in Alberta. We have the faculty associations. We have 16 seniors organizations around the table. We have 15 poverty activist organizations that are working and all members of Public Interest Alberta. We've created a democratic space where these groups and individuals are coming together to get to know each other, to build relations, but most importantly, to take action on these fires. So it is not just the child care advocates who are standing there demanding more child care. When we launched our child care campaign on a Mother's Day, we had the president of the Teachers Association. We had the nurses talking about how it's fundamentally a health issue. We had students talking about how critically important child care is, on and on and on. So we're trying to build those things and to visualize it. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, again, it was in the movie The Wizard of Oz. Do you see my fire and my water metaphors all drawing back into The Wizard of Oz? This is a shared story that we have between BC and Alberta. I could talk about a number of our advocacy successes, and it's so critical that we do talk about successes. But right now, both British Columbia and Alberta are reviewing their Water Allocation Act. And I don't know how many people in the room know about what the British Columbia government's doing in terms of reviewing the Water Allocation Act. Very few. That's not a good sign, folks, because this matters a lot. Like I worked in Ottawa saw my bio as the Director of Campaigns and Communications. I've traveled all over the world with Maud Barlow and fighting issues of water, and this one is very critical for us here in Alberta and BC. They want to create a water market through water allocation. By that, I don't mean water pricing. By that, I mean when a city needs more water, they have to go to the province and get that water and get a license for it. What we have in southern Alberta is the first water market where the city of Okotoks, who's at its maximum growth, cannot grow anymore because it doesn't have any more water. It needs to buy it from existing license holders. There was a development north of Calgary called Cross Iron Mills. They spent $15 million buying their water license in order to establish their big box store, which I was opposed to anyways. They want to create that water market in Alberta, and because of the close political ties and because we always send our brilliant ideas across this country, particularly to BC, it'll be coming here as well. So Our Water's Not for Sale is a big coalition that we've established in Alberta. We have over 60 organizations that have signed on to it. We have 2,000 people who've signed on to it over the last year. We have many municipal government officials, including the president of the Alberta Urban Municipality Association, who participated in our launch media conference. So we've done the analysis around that. We've designed the work in terms of articulating the flaw, the outrage, and building hope around that. And we are mobilizing as much as we can, and we hope to be working very closely with the folks in BC on that. When I work with Maud Barlow, and many of you probably heard her speak and say this before, and we talk about celebrating our successes, she always reminds people about this senior, this mentor that she had, who always said, you know, young people nowadays, they think they could do social justice every once in a while. But it's like taking a bath. You have to do it every day or you stink. So ultimately, that's what we're doing. We need to tell our stories. We need to look at how we're being successful and how we do this every day. Thank you very much.